The first thing people noticed about Deborah Adeyemi was not her beauty, though it was undeniable. It was the stillness she carried, a composed elegance that seemed to slow the air around her. At 45, she moved through the world with the grace of someone who had learned, sometimes painfully, how to hold herself together. Her laughter was soft, her voice measured, her eyes deep with stories she did not volunteer. On this particular Sunday morning, the city of Ibadan breathed gently under a pale gold sky. The rains had washed the streets clean the night before, leaving the red earth damp and fragrant. Deborah sat in the third pew of Grace Covenant Chapel, her back straight, her Bible resting neatly on her lap. Sunlight streamed through stained glass windows, painting her cream lace blouse with faint colors, blue, amber, and rose. She had come early, as she always did. Church was not just a routine for Deborah, it was refuge. It was where she laid down the invisible weights she carried all week, the expectations, the whispered questions, the polite pity from well-meaning acquaintances who thought her life incomplete because she walked it alone. Why are you still not married? Did you wait too long? Are you too choosy? She had heard them all, sometimes spoken, often implied. Deborah closed her eyes as the keyboardist began a gentle progression. The worship leader's voice rose, tender and reverent, filling the hall. Spirit of the living God, fall afresh on me. Her lips moved silently with the words. Her heart followed more slowly. She loved God deeply. This was the one truth she never questioned. But lately, her prayers had changed. They were no longer urgent cries or desperate pleas. They were quieter now, heavier. Lord, I am grateful, she prayed, but if companionship is still written in my story, let it come from you. I am tired of hoping wrongly. A soft amen escaped her lips. Behind the church, near the technical booth, Martins Okafor adjusted a microphone stand and exhaled slowly. At 87, he had the easy confidence of a man who knew who he was, though life had not handed him everything gently. He wore a charcoal gray shirt with the sleeves rolled just enough to reveal strong forearms, the kind shaped by honest work rather than a gym. He was new to Grace Covenant Chapel, new to Ibadan entirely. He had moved from Enugu barely 6 months ago after accepting a project management role with a construction firm overseeing a church-sponsored housing initiative. His Sundays had become a mix of service and observation, volunteering with the media team while quietly searching for a place to belong. Martin scanned the sanctuary, checking sound levels, his eyes passing over faces he was beginning to recognize. Then they stopped. There was something about the woman in the third pew. She was not flashy, she was not trying to be seen, yet she seemed anchored, as though the chaos of the world had learned to bend around her rather than break her. Her skin glowed softly in the filtered light, her natural hair pulled back into a low, elegant style. She listened with her whole being, as if worship was a conversation she took seriously. Martins frowned slightly, unsettled by the subtle tug in his chest. Easy, he told himself. You are here to serve. Focus. But his eyes drifted back again. Deborah felt it before she saw it, the subtle awareness of being observed. She opened her eyes slowly and turned her head, her gaze meeting Martin's across the aisle. For a brief, suspended moment, the world narrowed. There was no thunder, no dramatic swell of music, just a look, steady, curious, respectful. Martins looked away first, clearing his throat and pretending to check a cable connection. Deborah's brows knitted slightly. She turned forward again, her heart beating a fraction faster than before. Get a grip, she scolded herself gently. You are not a girl. Yet something had shifted. Not excitement, not attraction, not yet. Recognition. The service flowed on, scripture reading, sermon, altar call. The pastor spoke about seasons, about how God often works in the waiting, weaving purpose in what feels like delay. Deborah listened intently, unaware that the words were stitching themselves into a moment that had already begun. After the final prayer, the congregation arose in a hum of conversation and movement. Deborah gathered her things carefully, slipping her Bible into her bag. She preferred to leave quietly, but today, the aisle felt narrower, the room fuller. Excuse me, ma. The voice came from behind her, warm, respectful. She turned. Up close, Martins was even more striking, not in a polished way, but in a grounded one. His eyes were kind, attentive. There was no rush in him. "Yes," Deborah replied. "I hope I'm not disturbing you. I'm Martins. I noticed your scarf dropped." He handed her the silk scarf she hadn't realized had slipped from her bag. "Oh, thank you," she said, surprised. "I'm Deborah." Their hands brushed briefly as she took it. The contact was light, almost accidental, yet it sent a quiet awareness through them both. "You are welcome," Martin said. Then, after a pause that felt deliberate, he added, "I am still finding my way around here. Would you mind telling me where the exit to the car park is? I always seem to get turned around." Deborah smiled, a small, polite curve of her lips. "You are not the only one. This building has a mind of its own." They walked together, side by side, their steps unhurried. Conversation came easily, cautiously. "So you are new?" she asked. "Yes, I am from Enugu. Work brought me here." He hesitated. "And you? You've been here a while?" "Almost 10 years, she said. "This church, it became home." Martins nodded, absorbing her words. "It shows." She glanced at him. "What shows?" "That you belong here." Something about the sincerity in his tone made her look away, suddenly aware of the gentle warmth spreading through her chest. They reached the car park entrance. Sunlight spilled freely here, the noise of the city returning. "Well," Deborah said, adjusting her bag strap, "this is me." "Thank you for your help," Martins replied. Then, as if compelled by a thought he had not fully examined, he added, "I hope we'll talk again." Deborah met his gaze. For the briefest moment, she considered the invisible line between caution and possibility, the years that separated them, the life experience etched into her spirit. "I'm sure we will," she said at last. They parted, each walking in opposite directions, yet both glancing back once, almost involuntarily. As Deborah drove home, the city blurring past her windshield, a quiet question stirred in her heart, one she had not asked herself in a long time. Could God still be writing love into my story? And across town, Martin sat in his car longer than necessary, hands resting on the steering wheel, replaying the calm strength in Deborah's eyes. Neither of them knew it yet, but the quiet between their prayers had just been answered with a beginning. Deborah's apartment sat on the second floor of a modest but well-kept building in Bodija. It was the kind of place that reflected its owner, tasteful without excess, calm without coldness. Soft instrumental worship music played faintly, and she set her handbag down and slipped out of her shoes, her feet meeting the cool tiled floor. She stood still for a moment. Sundays usually ended like this, quiet, predictable. She would change, prepare a light meal, maybe reread her notes from the sermon, and take a slow afternoon nap before evening prayers. But today, something restless stirred beneath the surface of her routine. Deborah moved into her bedroom and caught her reflection in the mirror. She paused, studying herself more carefully than usual. The faint lines around her eyes spoke of laughter and sorrow both. Her posture was still elegant, her presence still commanding, yet there was a softness there now, a vulnerability she rarely allowed herself to acknowledge. "You are 45, she reminded herself firmly. Not every polite conversation carries meaning. Yet, Martin's face intruded uninvited into her thoughts. His attentive eyes, his unforced smile, the way he had listened as though her words mattered. She shook her head slightly and turned away from the mirror. "Deborah, focus," she murmured aloud. But later that night, as she knelt beside her bed in prayer, her name surfaced again, not spoken, just felt. "Lord," she prayed slowly, "guard my heart. Let me not read signs where there are none. But if this moment is from you, give me clarity." She rose with no clear answer, only a strange peace that unsettled her more than doubt ever had. Martin's apartment was smaller and far less refined, a bachelor space that bore the marks of temporary living. Boxes still sat unopened in one corner, and the walls were sparsely decorated. He dropped onto his couch and leaned back, staring at the ceiling. He had not planned to talk to her. He had not even planned to notice her. Yet now, Deborah occupied his thoughts with a persistence that surprised him. "She's older," he reasoned quietly, "clearly older." He had always imagined his future differently. A woman closer to his age, someone still discovering herself, someone whose life had not yet hardened into settled patterns. And yet, Deborah had not felt hardened. She had felt assured. Martin sat up and rubbed his palms together. God, what was that? He was not the kind of man easily unsettled. Life had already stretched him in ways that forced maturity early. His father's death in his 20s, the responsibility of helping raise his younger siblings, the steady grind of building a career without shortcuts. He had learned to be careful with his heart. Still, something about Deborah bypassed his defenses. There had been no flirtation, no suggestion, just a presence that lingered. He exhaled slowly. If I see her again, he decided, I'll be polite, nothing more. But even as he said it, he knew restraint would not be simple. Over the next few weeks, Grace Covenant Chapel became a place of quiet intersections. They did not sit together, they did not seek each other out openly, yet somehow their paths crossed with gentle consistency, near the entrance, by the water dispenser, in the church courtyard after service. Each interaction was brief but meaningful. Good morning, Deborah. Good morning, Martins. How was your week? Well enough, busy. You look tired. He smiled. Occupational hazard. Sometimes they exchanged little more than that. Other times, conversation lingered. A comment about the sermon, a shared laugh over church announcements, a mutual observation about the unpredictable Ibadan weather. What neither of them acknowledged aloud was the way these moments began to anchor their Sundays. Deborah found herself arriving just a little earlier, her eyes unconsciously scanning the sanctuary before she caught herself and sat down. Martins began finishing his technical checks faster, freeing himself to step into the service sooner. Church friends noticed, of course. Deborah's closest confidant, Auntie Bola, leaned over one Sunday and whispered, "Who is that young man you keep talking to?" Deborah stiffened. "We're not talking, we're greeting." Auntie Bola smiled knowingly. "Greeting can become something else, my dear." Deborah's lips pressed together. "Please." But later that afternoon, the comment replayed in her mind. Greeting can become something else. She had not allowed herself to consider that possibility. Not seriously. There were too many reasons not to. Age, expectations, the unspoken judgments of society and church alike. And yet, there was also something undeniable. She felt seen. The invitation came unexpectedly. Martins was packing up cables one Thursday evening after midweek service when Deborah approached him. "Martins," she said softly. He turned, surprised but pleased. "Yes. I don't know if you are free this Saturday," she began, choosing her words carefully. "But the Women's Fellowship is organizing a charity outreach. We need a few volunteers to help with logistics. I thought you might be interested." She kept her tone neutral, professional. Martins considered it. "What kind of logistics?" "Transportation, setup, general coordination." He nodded slowly. "I can do that." Her shoulders relaxed almost imperceptibly. "Thank you. I'll send you the details." They exchanged numbers then, a small act that felt heavier than it should have. That night, Martin stared at her contact name on his phone longer than necessary. Deborah Adeyemi. He typed a message, deleted it, then typed again. "Good evening, Deborah. This is Martins. Thank you for thinking of me for the outreach." A pause. "You are welcome. Thank you for agreeing to help. God bless you." Simple, polite, safe. Yet his heart beat faster than it should have. Saturday came bright and warm. They worked side by side for hours, loading supplies, coordinating volunteers, distributing food and clothing in a low-income neighborhood on the city's outskirts. Deborah was in her element, organized, compassionate, authoritative without being domineering. Martins watched her quietly. She spoke gently to elderly women, knelt to meet children at eye level, and gave instructions with calm confidence. People listened to her, not out of fear, but respect. At one point, as they paused to rest under a mango tree, Martins handed her a bottle of water. "You lead well," he said simply. She smiled, wiping sweat from her brow. "Leadership is easier when the purpose is clear." He nodded. "That's true." There was a comfortable silence between them, broken only by distant laughter and conversation. "Deborah," said Martin suddenly, his voice softer, "do you ever feel like life didn't turn out the way you expected, but you are not sure if you should grieve that or accept it?" The question surprised him. "Yes," he admitted, "often." She looked at him then, really looked at him. "How do you handle it?" He thought for a moment. "I remind myself that God sees the whole picture. I may not like every chapter, but I trust the author." Her breath caught slightly at his words. "That's beautifully said," she murmured. Their eyes held, something unspoken passing between them.
Too quickly, someone called Deborah's name, breaking the moment. She stood, smoothing her skirt. Duty calls. Martins watched her walk away, a quiet realization settling into his spirit. This was no longer casual curiosity. This was something deeper and far more dangerous. As the sun dipped low and the outreach came to an end, Deborah gathered her things, unaware of the internal battle unfolding within Martins. He knew the question he had been avoiding was now unavoidable. What are you willing to risk if this is real? And Deborah, driving home that evening with tired muscles and a full heart, felt a gentle but persistent stirring she could no longer dismiss. Something was shifting within her walls, within her prayers, and change, she knew, never arrived without asking for courage.
The following Sunday arrived with a hush that felt intentional, as though the heavens themselves were leaning in to observe what would unfold. Deborah stood before her mirror longer than usual, adjusting the cuffs of her soft teal dress. It was elegant without trying, flowing fabric, modest cut, tailored just enough to honor the woman she had become. She studied her reflection, not with vanity, but with discernment. You are not preparing for anything, she told herself firmly. You are simply going to church. Yet her heart betrayed her calm. She reached for her perfume, hesitated, then set it back down. No, she decided, let everything remain honest. As she stepped out of her apartment, Deborah whispered a quiet prayer. Lord, order my steps and my heart. Martins arrived early as usual, but his focus wavered. He found himself glancing toward the entrance more often than necessary, his chest tightening each time someone walked in who was not her. When Deborah finally appeared, sunlight tracing her silhouette, something in him stilled. She caught his eye almost immediately. This time, neither of them looked away. After service, they found themselves standing side by side near the church garden, a space filled with trimmed hedges and stone benches worn smooth by time and conversation. Good morning, Martin said, his voice lower than usual. Good morning, Deborah replied, her smile gentle but guarded. They sat. For a moment, neither spoke. The silence between them was no longer empty. It was layered with questions, with restraint, with a mutual awareness neither was quite ready to name. How was your week? Deborah asked at last. Martins exhaled slowly. Busy, but reflective. She nodded. I understand that. He turned slightly toward her. The outreach last Saturday, it stayed with me. With me too, she said. Service has a way of reminding us who we are. And who we are becoming, he added. Deborah met his gaze, something flickering there. Recognition, perhaps, or caution. Yes, she said softly. They spoke of small things then, church plans, work projects, the unpredictable economy. Yet beneath every word ran a deeper current, one that tugged insistently at them both. Finally, Martin straightened. Deborah, he began, then paused. May I ask you something, honestly? Her fingers tightened slightly around her handbag strap. Go ahead. He chose his words carefully. Do you ever feel like certain connections arrive later in life, not to disrupt us, but to refine us? Her breath caught. She looked away briefly, then back at him. Yes, she said, but refinement can be painful. He nodded. That's what scares me. The admission hung between them. Before Deborah could respond, Auntie Bola's voice cut through the moment. Deborah, there you are. Deborah rose smoothly, her composure returning like armor. Excuse me, she said to Martins. We'll talk later. He watched her walk away, the unanswered weight of his question settling heavily on his chest. That night, Deborah sat on her balcony, the hum of the city below her a distant murmur. A cup of tea cooled, forgotten in her hands. Martin's question replayed in her mind, persistent and unsettling. Certain connections arrive later in life. She had spent years convincing herself that love, romantic love, had passed her by, not as punishment but as providence. She had made peace with companionship in other forms, friendships, ministry, solitude.
But peace, she was realizing, was not the same as closure. Her phone vibrated softly. A message. "Good evening, Deborah. I hope you got home safely." She stared at the screen longer than necessary. "I did. Thank you for checking. Good evening, Martins." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. "I hope my question earlier didn't make you uncomfortable." She swallowed. "It didn't. It just made me think." A pause. "Would you be open to continuing that conversation sometime? Maybe over coffee?" Her heart pounded, steady, insistent. This was the moment she had both anticipated and feared. She set the phone down, closed her eyes, and breathed deeply. "Lord," she prayed silently, "if this door is not from you, close it gently. But if it is, give me wisdom." She picked up the phone again. "Yes, I think that would be fine." Almost immediately, his reply came. "Thank you, truly. I'll let you know a time that works for me." She smiled despite herself, then sobered. This was not excitement she felt, it was gravity. The cafe was quiet, tasteful, tucked away from the main road. Soft music played as Deborah arrived, her nerves carefully hidden beneath poise. Martins was already there. He stood when he saw her, pulling out her chair with a courteous ease that did not go unnoticed. "Good morning," he said. "Thank you for coming." "Thank you for asking," she replied. They ordered, then sat facing one another. A small table suddenly felt like sacred ground. For a while, they spoke of neutral things, work, books, faith. Yet beneath every word ran a deeper current, one that tugged insistently at them both. Finally, Martin straightened. "Deborah," he began, then paused. "Before we go any further, there's something you should know." He leaned in slightly. "I'm listening." "I am 45 years old," she said plainly. "I have lived a full life. I have loved and I have lost. I am not looking for excitement or distraction." He nodded slowly, eyes steady. "I understand," she continued, her voice calm but firm. "I am also aware of what people see when they look at us. I do not want to place you in a position where you feel judged or pressured." Silence followed. Then Martin spoke, his tone measured but resolute. "Deborah, I won't pretend I haven't thought about our age difference. I have. But I've also learned that maturity doesn't always follow years, and that connection doesn't ask permission from society." Her eyes searched his face. "I am not here to play games, and I am not here to rescue or be rescued. I simply want to know you with honesty and with God at the center." Emotion stirred unexpectedly in Deborah's chest. "That sounds beautiful," she said quietly, "but beauty does not guarantee safety." "No," he agreed, "but faith doesn't either, and we still walk." They held each other's gaze, something fragile and profound forming between them. When they parted later that afternoon, there was no physical closeness beyond a respectful handshake, yet the space between them felt altered, charged with intention. As Deborah drove home, her thoughts raced. She had crossed a line, not into sin, not into recklessness, but into possibility. And possibility, she knew, was dangerous territory. Martins watched her car disappear down the road, his heart both lighter and heavier than before. This was no longer a quiet stirring, this was a choice unfolding. Neither of them could yet see where it would lead, but both sensed that turning back would come at a cost. And somewhere, deep in the unseen, destiny leaned closer.
The days that followed their meeting settled into an uneasy rhythm, calm on the surface, restless underneath. Deborah became acutely aware of herself in ways she had not been in years. She noticed the tone of her voice when Martin's name appeared on her phone, the slight lift of her heart when his messages came, never excessive, never inappropriate, always thoughtful. "Good morning, Deborah. I trust your day is starting well." "Good afternoon. I hope work is kind today." Simple words, yet they carried weight. She was careful not to respond too quickly, not because she wished to play games, but because she needed space to think, to pray. This was unfamiliar terrain, and she refused to walk it carelessly.
One evening, after a particularly long day at work, Deborah sat at her dining table with her Bible open but unread. The words blurred as her thoughts wandered. "Lord," she prayed silently, "am I strong enough for this, or am I only lonely?" The question frightened her. She had worked hard to build a life that was full, meaningful work, service in church, friendships that sustained her. Loneliness was not her identity, yet companionship was a desire she had buried so deeply that its reemergence felt like weakness. She pushed her chair back and knelt on the floor. "If this is not from you," she whispered, "please remove it. I cannot afford another heartbreak, not at this stage." Peace came slowly, not as an answer, but as reassurance. Martins, meanwhile, found his own lines being tested. His younger sister, Amaka, was visiting for the weekend. She perched on his couch, scrolling through her phone while he prepared dinner. "So," she said casually, "anyone special in Ibadan yet?" He stiffened. "Why do you ask?" She grinned. "Because you are smiling at your phone like a teenager." Martin sighed. "It's nothing. That usually means it's something," Amaka countered, eyeing him shrewdly. "Who is she?" He hesitated, then decided honesty was better than secrecy. "Her name is Deborah." Amaka's eyebrows rose. "Deborah, okay. Age?" He paused. 45. Amaka blinked. "And you are 37? "Yes." Silence followed, heavy, assessing. "Do you like her?" Amaka asked quietly. Martins nodded. "I respect her, and yes, I think I do." Amaka leaned back, her expression thoughtful. "Then be careful, not because of the age, but because people will talk, and because if this is serious, it will require courage." "I know," he said softly. She smiled then, reaching for her bag. "If she makes you pray more and lie less, that's already a good sign." He laughed despite himself. Church, once a neutral ground, became a place of subtle tension. People noticed, they always did. The way Martins greeted Deborah with warmth but restraint, the way Deborah's attention sharpened when Martins spoke in group discussions. Nothing improper, yet nothing invisible. Whispers began. "Isn't she older than him? Ah, maybe he's just being polite. Let us watch." Deborah heard them. She always did. One afternoon, she sat in her office long after everyone else had left, staring at an email she had read 3 times without comprehension. "I cannot pretend this won't cost me," she thought. "Reputation, comfort, familiar approval." Her phone buzzed. "Deborah, may I call you? I'd like to talk if this is a good time." She typed back, "Yes, you can call." His voice came through warm and steady. "Thank you," he said. "I wanted to ask how you're doing. You seemed thoughtful on Sunday." She exhaled. "I am." A pause. "Deborah," he said carefully, "I don't want to be a source of confusion in your life. If at any point this becomes too heavy, please tell me." Her throat tightened. "That's kind of you. But also," he continued, "I don't want fear to decide for us either." Silence stretched between them. "I don't know what the right balance is," she admitted. "Neither do I," he said. "That's why I'm praying. A lot." That made her smile. "Me too," she said softly. They ended the call without resolution, but with mutual understanding. The breaking point came unexpectedly. It was a Friday evening fellowship meeting when Pastor Adekunle spoke on discernment in relationships. The message was thoughtful, balanced, but Deborah felt each word land uncomfortably close to home. "Not every door that opens is meant to be entered," said the pastor, "and not every delay is denial." Deborah's hands trembled slightly in her lap. After the service, as she gathered her things, Pastor Adekunle approached her. "Deborah," he said kindly, "may I have a word?" Her heart sank. They stepped aside. "I've noticed you seem burdened lately," he said gently. "You are a pillar in this church, and I want you to know you are supported." She nodded, swallowing. "Thank you, sir." He hesitated, then added, "If you are navigating a decision, remember you don't walk alone." The words were not accusatory, they were compassionate. Yet Deborah left that night with tears burning behind her eyes. She called Martins as soon as she reached home. "I need to see you," she said. "Tomorrow." He didn't ask why. "I'll be there." They met at the same cafe, the familiarity now tinged with gravity. Deborah spoke first. "This is harder than I thought," she confessed. "Not because of you, but because of what this stirs in me." Martins listened, his face intent. "I am not afraid of loving," she continued. "I am afraid of being foolish, of misinterpreting God's timing." He nodded slowly. "And I am afraid of holding back out of fear and missing what God may be offering." They sat in silence, the weight of honesty between them. Finally, Deborah spoke again, her voice steady but resolute. "I need space," she said. "Not distance, but intentional space. Time to pray, to listen." Martin's chest tightened, but he didn't argue. "I respect that," he said. "How much time?" "I don't know yet." He smiled faintly. "Then I'll wait." Her eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. "Thank you," she whispered. As they stood to leave, Martins paused. "Deborah," he said, "whatever happens, I'm grateful I met you." She met his gaze, her heart aching with both hope and restraint. "So am I." They walked away from each other once more, but this time the separation felt heavier. Not because something was ending, but because something precious was being tested, and neither knew what the answer would cost.
The first week of space felt deceptively manageable. Deborah kept herself busy. Longer hours at work, extra commitments at church, extended phone calls with friends she hadn't spoken to in months. On the surface, life flowed as it always had, structured, purposeful. Yet beneath the rhythm, something essential felt muted. She no longer checked her phone first thing in the morning. There were no gentle greetings waiting, no thoughtful messages that asked about her day. Silence filled the gaps Martin's presence had quietly occupied. At night, Deborah lay awake longer than usual, staring at the ceiling as familiar prayers took on unfamiliar shapes. "Lord," she whispered one evening, "is this restraint, or is it fear wearing the mask of wisdom?" She received no immediate answer. Martins felt the absence more sharply than he had expected. He respected Deborah's request completely. He did not call, he did not text. He resisted the urge to pass by places where he might accidentally see her. But restraint did not quiet his thoughts. He found himself replaying their conversations, her measured words, the way her eyes revealed both strength and longing. He questioned himself relentlessly. Am I being selfish? Am I forcing a door God has not opened? Or am I walking away too easily? One evening, after a particularly restless day, Martins visited the small chapel attached to the church compound. It was empty, dimly lit, the air heavy with incense and quiet reverence. He knelt. "God," he said plainly, "I don't want to fight you. If Deborah is not meant to be part of my future, take this feeling away. I will accept it." His voice cracked despite his effort to remain composed. "But if this is from you, then I need courage, because this path will not be easy." Silence answered him, but it was not empty. 2 weeks passed. Deborah felt it during worship one Sunday morning, a sudden, overwhelming sense of grief that surprised her with its intensity. Tears welled unbidden as the choir sang about surrender and trust. She bowed her head, shoulders trembling. Why does this hurt so much, she wondered, if it was never meant to be? After service, she avoided lingering. She did not want to run into Martins. Not yet. She needed clarity, not temptation. But clarity refused to be rushed. That evening, Deborah received an unexpected call from her younger cousin, Funke. "Deborah," Funke said brightly, "are you free next weekend? There's a small family gathering in Lagos. You should come." Deborah hesitated. "I'll think about it." Funke laughed. "You always say that. But listen, you've been carrying too much alone. Come and breathe." Deborah agreed reluctantly. The change of environment helped, briefly. Lagos buzzed with life, noise, and familiarity. Surrounded by family chatter and laughter, Deborah felt lighter. But in quiet moments, her thoughts returned uninvited. She caught herself almost calling Martins twice. She didn't. The third week brought an unexpected encounter. Deborah had stayed late at the church office one Thursday evening, finalizing plans for an upcoming conference.
When she stepped out into the courtyard, the sky was already deepening into dusk. She froze. Martin stood near the gate, speaking with the security guard. He turned at the sound of her footsteps. For a moment, neither moved. "Deborah," he said softly. "Deborah." There was no awkwardness, only something tender and restrained. "I didn't know you'd be here this late," he said. "I could say the same." A pause. "I was asked to check on some equipment. I hope I'm not intruding." She shook her head. "No." They stood there, the space between them charged with everything they had not said. "How are you?" he asked quietly. She searched his face. "I'm learning." He smiled faintly. "Me too." They walked slowly toward the gate together, neither rushing to end the moment. "I didn't realize how loud silence could be," Deborah admitted. He chuckled softly. "I thought I was the only one who noticed." "Did you?" She glanced. "Did you what? That the silence wasn't empty?" He stopped walking. "Deborah," he said, turning fully toward her, "I have tried to be obedient, to give you space, but I need to be honest." Her heart pounded. "I don't feel released, not from caring, not from hoping, and I don't believe God is a God of confusion, but He is a God of process." Tears stung her eyes. "I don't feel released either," she admitted, "and that frightens me." He nodded. "Me too." They stood there, the city's distant noise framing their fragile honesty. "What do we do?" she asked. "I think," he said slowly, "we stop running from the question and start asking God together." She hesitated. "Together?" He met her gaze. "In prayer, with boundaries, with accountability." Her heart ached with longing and relief. "That feels right," she said. He smiled, a real one this time. "Then, let's do it right." They agreed then, not to rush into declarations or assumptions, but to walk intentionally, to pray together weekly in the presence of trusted mentors, to allow clarity to come without pressure. As Deborah drove home that night, something settled within her. Not certainty, but peace. The silence had spoken, and it had not said no. Yet, even as hope stirred, she sensed that the true test was only beginning. Because when God begins to answer deeply buried prayers, He often does so by shaking foundations we thought were settled. And Deborah knew this journey would demand more courage than she had ever needed before.
The decision to walk together, carefully, prayerfully, brought an unexpected calm. Not because the questions disappeared, but because they were no longer faced alone. Every Wednesday evening, Deborah and Martins met in the small counseling room beside the church library. The door remained open, the fluorescent light slightly too bright, the space intentionally unromantic. They prayed. Sometimes they spoke. Sometimes they sat in silence, listening. It was during one of those moments of prayer that Deborah realized how deeply Martins's faith resonated with hers. Not loud or performative, but grounded and sincere. He did not rush God. That alone steadied her heart. Yet, peace, she was learning, did not mean privacy. The whispers grew bolder. A woman from the choir lingered too long after rehearsal one evening, her curiosity barely disguised. "Deborah, my dear, that young man, Martins, he seems very present these days." Deborah smiled politely. "He serves in the media." The woman hummed. "Yes, service." Deborah excused herself, her composure intact, but her heart heavy. It was one thing to face internal conflict. It was another to carry the weight of public scrutiny, especially within the church, where appearances often masqueraded as discernment. Martins felt it too. A senior colleague at work joked casually, "Guy, Ibadan is full of fine girls. Why are you always in church meetings?" Martins laughed it off, but the words lingered. Even Amaka, supportive as she was, asked gently over the phone, "Are you ready for people to misunderstand you?" "I don't know if anyone ever is," he replied honestly. "Just don't lose yourself trying to prove something," she warned. He held on to that advice. The real challenge came when Deborah's mother called.
"Mommy," Deborah answered, surprised. "My daughter," her mother said warmly. "How are you?" They exchanged pleasantries, but Deborah sensed the direction the conversation was heading. "I hear you've been spending a lot of time with one of the younger men in your church," her mother said carefully. Deborah closed her eyes. "Who told you that?" she asked quietly. Her mother sighed. "Ibadan's not as big as you think." Deborah chose honesty. "Yes, there is someone, but we are being careful." Her mother was silent for a long moment. "Deborah," she said finally, "I want your happiness, but I also want your peace. The world can be unkind." "I know," Deborah replied softly, "but I believe God is leading this." Her mother did not argue. "Then I will pray, and I will watch." The call ended, leaving Deborah both comforted and unsettled. One Sunday afternoon, after a joint prayer session with their mentor, Pastor Adekole invited them to sit. "You are both handling this with maturity, but I need to ask, are you prepared for opposition?" Martins nodded. Deborah hesitated. "In what form?" Deborah asked. "Subtle discouragement, direct criticism, well-meaning advice that carries fear," the pastor replied. "If you proceed, you must be united in purpose." Deborah felt the weight of his words. Later, as they walked to their cars, Martin spoke. "Deborah, if at any point this costs you more than you are willing to pay, I will understand." She stopped walking. "That's not fair," she said quietly. He turned. "Why?" "Because you are assuming the cost is only mine." He searched her face. "This will cost you too," she continued. "Your reputation, your expectations, your comfort." He nodded slowly. "I know." She met his gaze. "Then let us not frame this as a sacrifice I am making alone." Something shifted in his expression, respect deepening into something more resolute. "You are right. We either carry this together or not at all." The first real public test came at a church event. They were seated together, not touching, not overly close, yet visibly united. The room buzzed with quiet speculation. During a group discussion, someone pointedly asked, "Do you think age matters in God's design for marriage?" The question felt deliberate. Deborah's heart raced. Before she could respond, Martin spoke calmly. "I believe obedience matters more than age, and character matters more than perception." The room fell silent. Deborah felt a surge of gratitude and fear. Later, in the quiet of her car, she gripped the steering wheel, tears slipping down her cheeks. "This is becoming real," she whispered. Martins called that night. "I hope I didn't overstep earlier," she replied. "No, you stood with integrity." They sat in silence on the line, comforted by the sound of each other breathing. Yet, even as unity strengthened, Deborah felt a new fear rise, one she hadn't expected. What if this works? What if she allows herself to hope fully and it still ends in loss? That night, she dreamt of standing at a crossroads, two paths stretching before her, one familiar and quiet, the other uncertain but radiant. She woke up with her heart pounding. The world was watching now, and soon, she knew, they would have to decide whether to step fully into the light or retreat into safety. Either choice would change everything.
The question no longer lingered quietly at the edges of Deborah's life. It followed her into meetings, into prayer, into the small, unguarded moments when truth rose uninvited. What if this works? It was a question filled not with hope, but fear. She had learned how to survive disappointment, how to build beauty from broken expectations. What she had never learned was how to rebuild after hope itself was shattered. At 45, hope felt like a fragile luxury, one she had not planned to indulge again. And yet, God was asking her to look at it. The invitation arrived unexpectedly. Martins called one Tuesday evening, his voice thoughtful. "My mother is visiting next weekend," he said. "She's attending a women's conference in Ibadan." Deborah felt her breath hitch. And? She asked carefully. He asked about you, he continued. Not directly, but she's noticed your name comes up often. Deborah's heart pounded. She would like to meet you, he said gently, if you are open to it. The words landed with quiet force. Meeting friends had been one thing, mentors another. But family? This was no longer about possibility. This was about direction. I need to pray about it, Deborah said honestly. Of course, Martins replied. There's no pressure. But there was. Deborah spent that night on her knees. Lord, she prayed, do not let me mistake intensity for instruction. If this is not your will, stop me now. She slept little. Martin's mother, Mama Okafor, arrived with a presence that filled rooms, warm, observant, deeply rooted in faith. Her laughter came easily, but her eyes missed nothing. Martins has spoken well of you, she told Deborah when they finally met, her tone kind but searching. Deborah smiled politely. Only what is kind, I hope. Mama Okafor chuckled. He has always been careful with his words, especially when they matter. They spoke over tea, about life, ministry, faith, loss. Mama Okafor listened more than she spoke. Finally, she asked the question Deborah had been bracing for. You are older than my son, she said plainly. Deborah met her gaze steady. Yes, ma. And you are not afraid? Mama Okafor asked. Deborah paused. I am, she admitted, but I am more afraid of disobedience. Silence followed. Then Mama Okafor nodded slowly. That is a good fear. The meeting ended without judgment or blessing, only reflection. Martins walked Deborah to her car. You were honest, he said quietly. That was the only thing I could offer, she replied. He hesitated. My mother respects truth. Give her time. Deborah nodded, but inside something shifted. Meeting his mother had made one thing clear. This path would demand boldness, not reckless courage, but rooted conviction. That conviction was tested sooner than expected. A respected elder in the church requested a meeting with Deborah. She entered the office calmly, though her heart raced. I care about you, the elder began, and I must speak frankly. Deborah nodded. Please do. There are concerns, he said, about your influence, about setting precedents. Deborah listened, composed. Have I acted dishonorably? She asked quietly. He hesitated. No. Have I led anyone astray? No. Then the concern, she said gently, is perception. He sighed. Yes. Deborah leaned forward. With respect, she said, I have lived much of my life managing perception. I am learning now to prioritize obedience. The elder studied her. Just be careful, he said at last. She stood. I always am. That night, Deborah cried, not from shame, but exhaustion. Martins listened silently on the phone, his jaw tight. I didn't mean for this to become so heavy for you, he said. It was heavy before you. You just made me aware of it. He exhaled. Then let me share the weight. She smiled through tears. You already are. The following Sunday, something shifted again. During worship, Deborah felt an unexpected release, a loosening of fear she had carried for decades. She lifted her hands freely, tears streaming, her heart finally unclenched. Yes, she whispered, whatever you are doing, yes. After service, she found Martins waiting. I need to tell you something, she said. He braced himself. I am done running. I don't know the ending of this story, but I know I cannot live pretending I don't hear God. His eyes softened. Are you saying? He asked carefully. I am saying, she said steady now, that if we continue, it will be with intention, with openness, no half steps. His breath caught. That's all I've wanted, he said quietly. They stood there, the world around them blurring. Deborah knew this was her yes. And yes, she was learning, always carried a cost, but it also carried life. But even as she embraced the decision, she sensed the greatest challenge still ahead. Because saying yes to God often meant confronting the one fear she had not yet named aloud: the fear of truly being chosen. The weeks that followed Deborah's yes felt strangely quiet, like the hush that comes just before dawn. Nothing dramatic happened at first. No grand declarations, no public announcements, just intention. Martins became more present, not louder, more consistent, not more visible. He showed up when he said he would. He prayed when he promised he would. He listened deeply, patiently, when Deborah spoke of fears she had never given language to before. And Deborah, in turn, began to soften in places she had kept guarded for years. One evening, they sat across from each other in Deborah's living room, the lights low, the windows open to the hum of the city. A Bible lay open on the table between them, untouched. "I need to tell you something," Deborah said suddenly. Martins looked up. "Go ahead." "I have always been the strong one," she said quietly. "The composed one, the woman who had it together." He nodded, listening. "But strength became my hiding place," she continued. "I learned how to survive without being seen, without being chosen." Martin's chest tightened. "I don't know how to be pursued without feeling like I owe something in return," she admitted, "or like it will be taken away." He leaned forward slightly. "Deborah, look at me." She did. "I am not here because I pity you, and I am not here because I need something from you." She swallowed. "I am here," he continued, "because I see you fully, and I choose you, not in spite of your strength, but because of your truth." Tears spilled freely now. "That terrifies me," she whispered. "I know," he said softly. "It terrifies me too." They sat in silence, letting the truth settle. The final test came quietly but decisively. Martins received an offer to relocate to Abuja, a significant promotion, better pay, greater visibility. It was everything he had worked for. He told Deborah the same evening. She listened without interruption, her heart steady, though her chest ached. "That's an incredible opportunity," she said sincerely. "Yes," he agreed, "but it changes things." She nodded. "It does." They did not rush the conversation. They prayed, they sought counsel, they fasted. And then one evening, Martin spoke words that changed everything. "I don't want to build a future where you are an afterthought, and I don't want you to uproot your life out of fear." She studied his face. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying," he said steadily, "that wherever we go next, it should be together or not at all." Her breath caught. Marriage had never been a word she associated with peace. It had always sounded heavy, risky, but now... "What if people don't understand?" she asked quietly. He smiled faintly. "They already don't." She laughed through tears. "What if we fail?" she asked. He reached for her hand, not grasping, just offering. "Then we fail having obeyed God," he said, "and I believe that matters more than succeeding safely." She closed her eyes. For the first time in decades, she felt fear without paralysis. She opened her eyes. "Yes," she said. The announcement was simple. No grand ceremony, no dramatic defense, just truth. Some rejoiced, some questioned, some whispered, but something remarkable happened. People watched their consistency, their humility, their peace, and slowly resistance softened into respect. Mama Okafor smiled quietly during the engagement Thanksgiving service, her eyes wet. Deborah's mother held her hand tightly, whispering, "You look at peace." "I am," Deborah replied. The wedding took place on a warm afternoon beneath an open sky. Deborah walked slowly, her elegance unforced, her smile real. She was not a woman desperate for love. She was a woman who had waited for obedience. Martins watched her approach, his eyes full, not of pride, but reverence. When they spoke their vows, there were no promises of perfection, only commitment, only faith, only courage. That night, as they sat together in quiet reflection, Deborah leaned her head against Martin's shoulder. "Do you ever think about how unlikely this was?" she asked softly. He smiled. "Every day." She exhaled, content. "For years, I thought God had skipped my chapter." Martins kissed her forehead. He was just writing it slowly. Outside, the city breathed. Inside, peace settled. Against all odds, love had come, not loudly, not early, but right on time.